Ever try wrapping your head around moderating billions, and I mean billions, of posts online in hundreds of languages? With slang changing faster than, well, it's a tough job.
It really is, and it gets even more complex when you're a company like Meta trying to keep a handle on hate speech, especially when it comes to protecting immigrants.
Exactly. So today we're diving into that very issue, and specifically, the role of Meta's oversight board. Now, this is interesting because they're funded by Meta, but they operate totally independently.
Right. It's like Meta's attempt to create a kind of Supreme Court for content moderation.
Love that analogy. So are they doing enough to really protect immigrants from online hate? Or is their approach, well, maybe a little flawed? Let's find out. The Oversight Board is currently looking at two cases that perfectly illustrate how tricky this all is. First up, we're going to Poland. A far-right political party shared a meme. Sounds pretty typical so far, right?
Right.
But this meme used a racial slur. And it wasn't just a blip on the radar. We're talking over 150,000 views. To make matters worse, it was reported 15 times and still stayed up.
Wow.
The question is, why?
Well, this is where context becomes absolutely key. That particular slur, while it might be used thoughtlessly in other parts of the world, carries incredibly offensive and harmful weight in Poland. It highlights the fact that there's no universal dictionary of hate speech. What's considered deeply offensive varies drastically between cultures.
You're so right. And that makes me think, how can we possibly expect AI to keep up with all those nuances?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's precisely why Meta uses both AI and human moderators. The algorithms are great for catching the obvious stuff, the low-hanging fruit, if you will, but for the subtle nuances of language, especially when it comes to hate speech, you really need a human eye.
Absolutely. Okay, so case number 2. This time, we're headed to Germany. An image pops up that's basically discouraging immigration. Not great. But then you see the caption, and, well, that's where it gets really unsettling.
I hear you.
I mean, we're talking dehumanizing, xenophobic language, the kind designed to make people afraid and to stir up prejudice.
Yeah, and this case isn't an isolated incident either. Sadly, it reflects a much bigger and frankly worrisome trend of increasing anti-immigrant feelings across Europe. Online platforms, as much as we hate to admit it, can become breeding grounds for that kind of hateful rhetoric. They amplify existing biases, and even worse, they can normalize hate speech simply by exposing people to it over and over again.
It's the repetition that really does it.
It is. And it begs a question that goes way beyond just your blatant slurs. Should platforms be held responsible for policing what we call dog whistles, too?
Let's unpack that a little for our listeners.
Yeah.
Dog whistles are coded phrases, right? They might seem harmless on the surface, but actually they carry a hidden meaning for a specific group, often signaling prejudice or even hate.
Precisely.
And here's the real kicker with these two cases. Initially, Meta defended its decision to leave both of these posts up, even after they were flagged multiple times. But then, the Oversight Board stepped in. They're challenging Meta's decisions head-on, which is big enough in itself. But what's really interesting is that they're opening it up for public comment. That's a pretty powerful move.
It is. See, here's the thing. The Oversight Board's recommendations, while not legally binding, hold a surprising amount of sway. They're not just ruling on these two specific posts, they're setting a precedent for how Meta handles similar content in the future. Essentially, they have the potential to really push Meta towards a more globally sensitive and effective way of dealing with hate speech. Whether they actually will? Well, that's a whole other deep dive.
I like it. It really makes you think, is the Oversight Board the answer we've been looking for? Can they create a more effective and globally sensitive approach to this incredibly complex issue? Guess we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, keep those questions coming and stay curious, everyone.